Hello, everyone. This is Kailey with SandCastles and another episode of Grief and Brief. And today we're going to be talking about suicide. September is Suicide Awareness Month. And so, in the spirit of spreading awareness about suicide, we wanted to talk about it. I have with me today Leah, who's our newest SandCastles staff. She's going to share a little bit about her story and why SandCastles and our mission is so important to her. I am just thrilled for everyone at our Sandcastle sites and in our community to get to know Leah. She's got such a giving heart, and she's just a great addition to our team. And actually, Leah participated in Sandcastles in our program with her family in 2009 after the death of her mom to suicide. So I was wondering, Leah, if you can share a little bit of your story and maybe speak a bit to what it was like when you were younger to find out that your mom had died.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Kailey. Um, so my mom had MS growing up, which is multiple sclerosis. She was diagnosed when I was younger, and with that, came depression. I'm not really sure as a kid if I noticed her having depression as much. I felt like she masked it really well. Um, she ultimately did end up dying by suicide in 2009 when I was 12 years old and my sister was 10 years old. And the day that she died, I was told that mommy went to heaven today. And I had immediately cried and, just thought I was living in a dream. And of course, a 12-year-old, I think that I was just kind of in shock and just kind of trying to get through each day. And so a few weeks later, I did ask my dad about the cause of death. And he had then told me it was a suicide. And I was honestly quite surprised because I thought it was MS, but I didn't really ask any more questions after that. And it wasn't until like a few years later that I had asked about a specific cause of death. um, I feel like I kind of regrieved in that moment, learning like the specific cause. And I know that, parents and, guardians do the best they have with what they got. And I feel that, with that being said, um, I feel, each year I learn something new, and not that I fully regrieve, but kind of stuff to process each year and, stuff I'm still working through as an adult. I'm hoping actually one of these days to sit down with my aunt and one of my mom's best friends and kind of talk about the timeline leading up to her death and kind of what happened that day, because although I do remember some things, a lot of things I think are blocked out just because I can't remember and I was just so young. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. And, I'm sure that was overwhelming. Like you said, you were in shock, and there are many emotions that come with grief, especially a traumatic loss like a suicide death. Do you have any advice for a child or teen who might be experiencing something similar right now?
yeah, I mean, I think that with suicide comes a lot of guilt, whether you're a child
Mm.
or an adult. And the day that my mom died, I was not home. Me and my sister were at my aunt's house. And, I just remember thinking, like, what if I had called that day? Like, maybe she would still be here. And, other family members had reached out to my mom that day. Like, my grandma had called her early in the morning and they had a really great conversation. And then by afternoon, she had died. So it took me a long time to process that even if I did call my mom that day, it doesn't necessarily mean that she would still be here. Um, and I also think that, with that being said, children who lose a parent to suicide are also more likely to die by suicide. And that's just something I've kind of, it's a hard realization because I definitely have struggled with depression following, my mom's death. And so it was important to find the supports in my life. You know, my family has been a wonderful support to me. I have the best dad in the world, a very wonderful sister, and my mom's sister, my Aunt Denise, has been amazing. My grandma just died last year, but she was also a great support to me. And many others had really stepped up to help my dad and to raise me and Jacqueline, my sister. I also had, you know, wonderful friends. A lot of my friends from elementary school know my mom, and you know, a lot of people even from middle school and high school that didn't know my mom know my story and are very supportive of that. um, Attending SandCastles was a wonderful opportunity for me. I mean, SandCastles is the reason I am here today, because I found a passion for helping children who have experienced a death like me, and you know, my passion for going into social work and wanting to be able to help them. And I've also been in counseling in and out of my life because I think it's important to talk about um, my thoughts and my feelings and how I'm doing. And I think with um, each stage of life brings different, you know, grief. Like when I graduated from high school, she wasn't there. When I graduated from college, when I got married, those were all big things that obviously it was hard for her not to be there. But with counseling and, you know, grief groups and the support of my family, I learned techniques to kind of cope with my grief and to be able to kind of you know, get through these very difficult moments that are very exciting at the same time, but still difficult because I obviously would want my mom to be here. And I would say anybody like struggling, especially as a child who's lost a parent to suicide, I just want you to know that you are worthy, and I'm glad that you are alive and here today.
That's beautiful. You know, we see a lot at SandCastles of children who, you know, no matter the cause of death, have a lot of guilt and regret. And those are big emotions, I think, for children and teens to bear. So I definitely agree with you on finding your people that you can lean on. Your supports is huge in that grief process, even when sometimes it's hard to be vulnerable with other people and talk about those difficult things. That's so important for children and teens who are grieving and dealing with those difficult emotions. And because not only is it hard to talk about emotions, it's also hard to talk about suicide. It's kind of taboo, you know, in our society. We don't really talk about it. And so it's really hard when a suicide death happens to talk, especially with children, about what's happened. So, do you have any tips for parents or caregivers specifically on talking with children about suicide or dealing with those difficult emotions surrounding that kind of loss?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of the most difficult things you're going to do as a parent is if you have to, you know, tell your child that someone in their life died by suicide. It's not an easy thing by any means. But you know what I will say is it's important to be able to provide that safe space for your children to be able to come to you and talk about how they're feeling or that person. It's so important to be open and honest about the death and telling the truth. I think that's something that I appreciated about my dad is that he, although it was difficult for him to talk about, if I asked specific questions, he was, you know, able to answer them for me. And obviously, if there was anything he didn't know or somebody else didn't know, they would be willing to get the answer for me. Um, Something that I appreciated that my dad did is he would kind of have mental health check-ins. Like I had mentioned earlier, I definitely struggled with depression, and he, you know, if we were ever just driving alone in the car together, he'd just be like, "So how are you doing, Leah? Like what's going on with your mental health? Like anything I can help with?" And so I really appreciated those check-ins. For him to kind of know how I was doing, but also for him to be able to support me if I needed additional support. I would say one of the more difficult things that had happened following my mom's death is that we're part of a Catholic church, and one of the church members had said, well, dying by suicide is a sin. And just, as a child, I was like, I think I understood, like, okay, okay, I know it's a sin, but like, what was the point of that? And quite frankly, I mean, we can get in, to religion all day. I think that it's not a sin. I think my mom was very, very, very sick, and that's a very good way of explaining it with the varies that we talk about in SandCastles is, yes, my mom was very, very, very sick. She had an illness in her brain, and she felt that there was, no way out to rid her pain. So I think when explaining things to a child, obviously don't say it's a sin. I don't think that's helpful. And it honestly just made me feel bad when, that church member said that. And just explaining it, in language that they'll understand. Obviously, you would explain things differently to a 5-year-old versus like a 16-year-old per se. So just definitely using language appropriate for their age and being honest about what happened, being upfront about it kind of helps so that you're not re-grieving like a lot later down the road, let's say.
Absolutely. And I wanted to speak really quickly to the use of language and how we talk about suicide, and specifically, with different religious beliefs and how we use the words with young kids. But even as adults, I think the language is evolving. Instead of saying that somebody's committed suicide, the correct way to talk about it is died by suicide. So just wanted to give that information to whoever's listening as well. But as my last question here for you, Leah, we get a lot of questions from different people in the community about how people can best support grieving children and teens. And you spoke a little earlier about your friends and how they supported you through the death of your mom. And I wondered if there was anything specific that they did that helped you in your grief journey.
Yeah, I felt like a lot of my friends have always been like listening ears for me. They've always been open to me, like just calling if I'm having a bad day or just want to talk about my mom or just life in general. I have one friend who I've had for a very long time. We went to the same daycare together as babies. Her name is Emily. What I love about Emily is that she brings my mom up. Like it's okay to bring up the person, and just kind of, helps me memorialize her. Like she'll always be like, oh, you remember when Miss Laura, which is my mom, did this, or remember when you and Miss Laura went there, and stuff like that. So being able to remember her is just so important. And then as I got older, especially like in college or like late high school, something that I would do on my mom's like birthday or her death anniversary is I would go to Applebee's and get the triple chocolate down or meltdown cake. And I had friends or my husband would go with me too. So just being able to have those types of memories as well. And obviously, I forgot to mention earlier, my husband is a great, great support to me. And he has also had someone in his life die by suicide. So we are able to relate on that, although it, wasn't apparent. But I think, there's this unspoken language of, when you have someone die by suicide, you kind of just, you get it. It's very difficult as the survivor, but it's important that we're here to support each other and be able to memorialize our people, because I think like in the future, when I have kids one day, like I want them to, still know who their grandma was and is and everything like that.
Well, I want to thank you, Leah, for sharing everything that you've shared with me and with our listeners today. I think there's so much valuable information there. And thank you for sharing your experience and your tips and tricks for friends, for parents and caregivers, and for children or teens who might be listening who have experienced the death of someone to suicide. So thank you so much. And for everyone listening, if you need resources surrounding suicide, SandCastles, we are always here to help. If you know someone grieving that loss, have them give us a call or send us an email, and we'd be happy to get them resources, get them into our program so that they are not alone.